Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you'd like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We would also appreciate it if you could give us a positive rating and review, as it will help others to learn about autism stories. Fear is an emotion that I'm all too familiar in my life. And, many times it's taken over my life. However, as I've gotten older, I've found some ways to use this emotion to work for me and not against me. That's why I'm thrilled to talk with Marianne and Eloise on this episode of Autism Stories about learning things that she's fearful of and her book, Obsessive Intrusive Magical Thinking. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Marianne, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start off by just learning, where does your story in the autistic community begin?
I guess, as with all of us, it starts with birth. I know some people like to think it's something that you can catch or whatever, but it's have much of a choice. But I had quite a lot of problems at school and with employment and stuff. But I think because of when I grew up, in the 90s, and also being a girl, everyone just thought I was badly behaved. Even though I was literally at school biting people and walking out of classrooms and do all the things that you would, I think if I was a little boy, you'd figure it out a bit faster. So I didn't get any support, and then I started trying to get a diagnosis on the NHS when I was 22 or 23, because I had to work in an office, and I think that's a really easy way to find out that you've got problems, doing things the way that everyone else can. And then with some back and forth with health services and pursuing a diagnosis stuff, I got diagnosed 2.5 years ago now.
So every once in a while, I see a title of a book that really grabs my attention, and I really want to know everything about it. And I had that experience when I saw your book, Obsessive Intrusive Magical Thinking. I didn't think about it until I saw this book, but my life probably has been made whole by obsessive thinking. So how has obsessive thinking been helpful to you in your life?
Something I obviously write about in the book is that, as I'm sure you know as well, there's a lot of negatives with it. I had OCD as well, and I think, especially when you struggle with, I think the worst thing about obsessive thinking is when you already struggle with social interaction, I think every single time you speak to someone, you're then spending the next several days thinking did I say something wrong? Do they hate me? What did I do wrong? Especially, and I always felt so negligently about it, so I just wished that I could not. When you're thinking about bad things all the time, you just, and then when I really thought about it, especially in terms of being autistic, I think I realized that there are so many things our special interests and our ability to pursue what we like doing. For me, when I was little, that was reading, and it was Lego, and it was a big one for me. And learning about anything, whatever it was, I had hundreds of special interests, and I would just have one for I think it's an assumption that we only have one. You're the train guy, or you're the Star Wars guy, or you're But I think most people I know kind of phases of a handful that kind of rotate and take different importance at different times of their lives, or have kind of seasonal special interest. And for me, I think that's the thing that's been the most helpful, because I had obviously I'm autistic, I had problems at school and stuff. I had problems with my family and stuff, and I think being able to be so obsessively in love with certain things and books and movies and stuff, I think really kind of gave me purpose and gave me something to do other than keep getting into trouble.
When people think about obsessive, they usually think of OCD.
Yeah.
Do you think there are some false narratives of OCD that you kind of would just wish would go away?
I think there's a lot. I think it's getting a little bit better. I think something that was always the case was that no one ever understood what was going on inside. I had always, anything I'd read about OCD throughout my life was about people washing their hands or having cleanliness compulsions, and obviously that is the case for some people, but for me, I spent my whole child and stuff, having these really dark, obsessive thoughts about like, people I love dying and stuff like that. And then I would do things to get rid of that thought. And it might not be cleaning. It might be like intrusive thought, like step in the road without looking, or like, weird stuff like that, or like doing things over and over again, or like going back and checking the door is locked and stuff like that. And like, I think people don't understand that the action that you can see someone doing, like a repetitive action, is a response to like this internal thought process. Where there are some people who don't have the compulsion, but just having the thoughts is like bad enough. Like constantly, like, it's like fighting with your own brain, basically.
In preparing to talk with you, I read that part of your OCD is about things that you're afraid of, and you try to learn as much about them to kind of reduce that fear as possible. Why is that so important for you to do that?
I know. I think like knowledge is power, and things that we don't know about are so scary. Especially, I don't know. I kind of, when it comes to, one of my big ones would be like fire, and I think when you kind of learn a little more about fire and how it works and how you can fire safety and the actual statistics of having a house fire and the statistics of you're actually losing everything, like it's such a low, tiny chance, especially if you're, a careful person. And I think for me, for the way my brain works, it's just so important to, like, I don't know, I always say it, and like, it sounds dismissive, but it's only me dismissing myself. Like, I got quite good at, like, if my brain is like run up and down the stairs, like, 10 times and the house won't catch fire or whatever, I got quite good at being like, well, no, that's stupid. Like, that makes no sense. There's no correlation between what's in you. And you'd only do that if you're already in quite a good mental place. But yeah, it's the same with death and stuff. I think the more I understood death and like what it is and what actually happens and different rituals around death and like how to grieve properly, because in English and American cultures, I think people are very bad with grief and talking about death when you lose someone. And like, I think I think if any comforting, because it makes you less scared that it's just gonna like happen to you suddenly. In the case of like fire or whatever, but it's also just, I don't know. I think the more you confront yourself with something over and over again, you kind of get desensitized to it. Whereas if you try and push it away to the back of your mind, it's going to scare you if it appears somewhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've always had a fear of flying, and I've read about the statistics, like, oh, you're much more likely to get in trouble in a car accident versus the plane. But I have more of the, I guess I feel like I guess maybe it's like I have more control of the situation when I'm driving, when maybe in reality that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it depends where your brain's at, but sometimes like it kind of just makes you think like, oh, well then I won't drive. It doesn't make
Yeah.
you more willing to fly. It just makes you cut out more things that you can't do.
Yeah. Do you like learning about things, and then the expectations, and how, is it logical or not? Like, is there a, like, for your brain, is like there a big connection between like the emotional versus the logical or intellectual part of your brain?
I think so, but I think sometimes, I don't know, especially in the case of death, I think the more you know, the better, or like the more you confront it, not easier. Like something I wrote about in the book is, being scared of my granddad dying, and he actually died in July, and it doesn't make it any easier. But I think the fact that we both talked about death so much, and he was so honest, and like he gave me permission to grieve and to take, space to myself, well, and to talk to people about him, and to not like. I think sometimes when someone you love dies, you think like, oh, I don't want to bring it up, I don't want to bring everyone down or whatever, but you need to talk, and you need to like, I don't know, I think it helps the emotional things. It's not like just the logic of knowing about death and stuff. I think for me, it was learning a lot more about like death denial and how it impacts people and how important grieving probably is. And I think if I didn't have that foundation before I lost someone that meant so much to me, I think I'd be like completely even more lost
Mm-hmm.
than I am.
Now, getting back to the title of your book, I wanted to talk about an aspect of that, magical thinking. It seems to me that like the culture here, at least in the United States, is that it's okay for kids to believe in magic or fairy tales or things like that. But if you're an adult, that type of thinking is kind of frowned upon. So, what do you think adults miss out when they don't have the joy in believing in that magical thinking, believing in the unbelievable that kids kind of embrace?
I think it's interesting because, like, when I talk about magical thinking, I also mean like the idea that like your thoughts can impact like the outcome of stuff, whether that's like believing in the tooth fairy or like believing in Santa and thinking that if you're good, you'll get presents or whatever. And like, there's some aspects of that that is not acceptable for adults to do. Like, if you're an adult who believes in Santa, but then like, and I never want to be like disrespectful, but obviously it is acceptable for adults to be religious and to believe in God, and it's kind of a similar exchange of, it's like if I pray and I do this and I'm good, then I can go to heaven. And it's like, I think everyone kind of has some kind of framework of magical thinking, or believing that, if you think about your job all the time, you put everything into your job, then you'll be rewarded for it, which isn't always true.
Yeah, right.
I think everyone has like a framework of magical thinking, but when it comes to like actual like, I guess engaging in like believing in things that are a little bit, unbelievable. I don't know. I just think I think adults miss out on a lot, like neurotypical adults miss out on a lot, even just by denying themselves things that they're interested in. And like, if you really loved like Harry Potter when you were a kid or whatever, and that brought you a lot of joy, and like that could bring you the same joy going to like Harry Potter world as an adult, and like life's hard. There's no reason not to like. I don't know. I think everything would be a lot better if we all get people a bit more like space and permission to do things that make them happy, even if it seems silly.
Yeah. I know in addition to your book, you've done a lot, you do a lot of writing. How can people purchase your book and learn about the other wonderful things you've written about?
I think my book is so it's out in the US already, and it's in most of the bookstores. I think I've seen it in some independent ones. It's obviously on Amazon and stuff like that. I would always prefer that people buy it from their local bookshop if they can. And then I guess with other work, just by Googling me. I'm on Twitter and Instagram with my name. There's not a lot of people with my name. I'm quite easy to find.
Now, you were talking about people just doing or being engaged in the things that they love. And one of the things I love is watching TV shows. And it seems these days there's more and more TV shows about time travel. And maybe I've specifically paid attention to those because my spouse really loves time travel. So we watch a lot of those shows. So from what I understand, you're knowledgeable about time traveling characters on film and TV. Curious, what have been some of your favorite characters in time travel?
So I'm actually not super familiar with anything that's new. I guess you and your spouse are more up to date with that, because like to me it seems like something that kind of faded out of popularity. Because like what I write about in my book is that there was like a period of time, and again I think it's the same with magical thinking, where I think people just want control. Like people want to believe that like they could go back and change something in their own life, or they could like kill baby Hitler, or like it's like something that we all kind of wish we could do. And I think that's what's so like enduring about it. And I thought about it, and like it's a few things. Like I think one of the first games, it's kind of time travel, I guess. One of the first games I ever played was Zelda, and that was my biggest thing. I'm not a big video game person, but Zelda is like a big thing. And I remember playing Oracle of Ages and Phantom Hourglass. I feel like there's quite a few Ocarina of Time. I feel like time travel is such a fundamental part of Zelda, and that's fun for me. Back to the Future is a basic one, but like was a big like first thing. And I was thinking about it, and like I think Donnie Darko is like my big favorite. Yeah.
There's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, I feel like it pops up in everything that I like, especially like from a certain period of time.
Yeah. I remember, I think the first one that I saw that was Quantum Leap.
Oh,
Yes. That was fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think it's something everyone. It's such a weird one. I guess it's the same as I think everyone kind of wishes they had it, but we're so aware of like how many ways it could go wrong. Like if you think about who is in like a position to make that technology, it's like, do we really want like Elon Musk to have a time machine? Do we really? It's probably better left like on TV.
Well, that's kind of like the scary things about some of these things, like the people with the wealth are going to be the ones that would have access to these things anyway. I don't think it's
Yeah.
just going to be in like like you can sell like a time machine in like Walmart or something like that, or in a local store, and everyone could
Yeah.
purchase one.
Yeah, like the photo strip booth in like CVS or whatever. Like you can like go in and just
The curtain, and then you move to a different time. I don't know how, if it does work. I don't know if that's how it works, but that would be
yeah.
fun to think about.
Yeah.
Well, Marianne, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for talking with me.
Oh, thank you, and I hope you got what you needed out of it.
Absolutely, it was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much to Marianne for the conversation. To learn about Marianne, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. Did you know Autism Personal Coach through our coaching services can help you so that fear doesn't overtake your life? If this is something that you're interested in learning more about, please visit autismpersonalcoach.com for more information. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Autism Stories, and if you did, if you could tell a friend, foe, or anyone you know about it, so they could have the same enjoyable and educational experience as you when listening to Autism Stories, it would be very much appreciated. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.